Everyone already knows how the Pestilence works. Shoot, stack, spread, watch things melt. That's not the problem though. The problem is almost nobody's actually optimizing it. Most players build Pestilence like a normal LMG. Stack crit chance, crit damage, raw weapon damage, and then wonder why their ticks feel weak the moment they step into heroic or legendary. Here's the problem. The plague ticks can't crit. So half your build isn't doing anything for your actual damage. Yes, you need weapon damage, but that's only the baseline. The real scaling comes from multiplicative sources, like damage to targets out of cover, damage to armor, and amplified damage, combined with actually letting stacks build and transfer instead of spraying everything down too fast. That's the switch most people miss. And the moment you realize your damage isn't coming from your bullets, but from how those stacks spread and scale, everything falls into place. And suddenly, Pestilence starts wiping entire groups instead of just ticking in the background. So the real question isn't how it works. It's how do you push those plague ticks as far as you can possibly go, without turning yourself into glass, and without killing the consistency that makes this weapon so strong in the first place. Because there's a very specific balance, where your damage over time starts doing the heavy lifting, where enemies drop after you disengage, and where fights don't get harder, they get easier the longer they last. Because once you hit that balance, you're starting a chain reaction and letting it finish the fight for you. Before we go on and start optimizing the build, let's talk about the Pestilence itself first. The reason for using the exotic LMG is mainly because of the Plague of the Outcast talent. This comes closest to feeling a poison spreading on waves of enemies, and is one of the truly unique weapons within the division. The talent works as follows. Hits apply a debuff, dealing 100% weapon damage over 10 seconds. This stacks up to 50 times. Whenever an enemy dies with this debuff, 100% of the stacks are transferred to a nearby enemy within 25 meters. The most reliable way to get a Pestilence is by obtaining the blueprint by doing Outcast retaliations and wiping the kill squads while going from checkpoint to checkpoint. The Pestilence doesn't scale like a normal weapon, and that's where most builds fail. Its talent, Plague of the Outcast, is a weapon damage over time, meaning every stack stores your weapon damage at the moment you apply it and never recalculates. So the only stat that truly matters are raw weapon damage and amplifiers. Not crit chance, crit damage, headshot damage, or status effects. The goal isn't burst DPS, it's building a high damage bank that spreads and keeps killing after you stop firing, which means you need enough survivability to stay alive while the damage ticks do their work. If you overbuild damage, you die before it pays off, and if you overbuild defense, the ticks are too weak. So the entire build comes down to hitting that exact balance where your plague stacks become lethal and have time to chain across enemies, especially in heroic and legendary, where fights last long enough for Pestilence to reach its full potential. So if the damage isn't just in the weapon, then the real question is what stats and gear actually make those ticks hit hard. Let's take a look at all the pieces we're benefiting from in this setup. The first part can be rolled on the weapon itself. This all drops from the Pestilence. Your attributes are LMG damage up to 15%, and damage to targets out of cover up to 12%. And the third attribute can be rolled in various ways. Since we're looking for optimal damage scaling, damage to armor for 6% is the best option for that multiplicative damage source. If you happen to have a different roll, go up to the crafting table, under the weapons tab go to exotics and find your Pestilence. There you can reroll your stats. Take it easy though, since this costs a lot of materials you might need for other things. On my specific version, I have it on level 10 expertise for 10% extra weapon damage. You can get this up to level 30 and add in another 20% weapon damage. Now let's get into the gear pieces, mainly focusing on high-end sets for our bonuses. First of all, the 3 pieces from Langmo, which give us plus 20% explosive resistance for the 1-piece bonus and 20% skill health for the 2-piece bonus. Both are fine, but we're really here for the 3-piece bonus, which gives us a very nice bump in damage by adding plus 30% LMG damage, also increasing the damage for the ticks from Plague of the Outcast. I chose to put the Langmo pieces on the mask, holster, and backpack. And for the backpack specific, going for the named version, giving us perfectly unstoppable force, which pairs up extremely well with the way we're setting up the Pestilence sticks. The talent itself increases total weapon damage by 7% for 15 seconds upon killing an enemy, stacking up to 5 times, for 35% total. I think you get the point by now, but this also increases our tick damage from Plague of the Outcast. For the chest, I chose the Petrov brand set, which gives a 10% LMG damage increase. On top of that, we rolled it with the talent Obliterate for that extra 20% weapon damage. Because of the talent, Critical hits increase total weapon damage by 1% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 20 times. And yes, this increases the damage for ticks even more. For the knee pads, the Fox's Prayer. The brand set itself gives us 10% increase to rifle damage, which we won't be using. But even so, this piece boosts our damage significantly more than other options, thanks to the unique attribute for 8% damage to targets out of cover. This is because of the damage amplifier is at the end of the damage calculation, increasing all damage done by that 8% increase. The only requirement is that the enemy is out of cover. And for the final piece, we're using the one exotic that we keep coming back to across almost every build, because it just works, every single time. The Overdog Gloves. The talent you get from this exotic is called Weakest Link, which amplifies weapon damage by 30% to the lowest ranking enemy within the tier hierarchy. To avoid the exact science behind this, we follow a simple rule of thumb, focusing on health bar color: red, purple, and yellow in that order. For the cores, we needed to find a balance for the higher level content where keeping pressure and staying alive was in the right spot. Therefore, we got 3 red cores for 45% weapon damage, and 3 blue cores to get us up to 1.4 million armor. For the minor attributes, we got ourselves 50% crit chance and a little over 100% crit damage. The 50% crit chance is needed to stack the obliterate damage faster, ramping up our damage as soon as possible. As for the specialization, our go-to option is Gunner. Now this isn't the only way to go, but it does give us quite some useful benefits. Let's take a look at the skill tree. First is the 10% armor you get after every kill. Next, generating 10% ammo every 60 seconds. Then, the foam grenade to ensnare enemies, keeping them locked into place. And last, but certainly not least, the Banshee Pulse adds another stun with amazing range. As always, and not specific to any specialization, don't forget your weapon damage multipliers. Since we're stacking up on weapon damage for our ticks of Plague of the Outcast, make sure you have it set on LMG for that 15% extra weapon damage. Let's take a look at how much weapon damage we've been stacking. From the Pestilence itself, we get 10% weapon damage from level 10 expertise, plus 15% LMG damage, plus 12% damage to targets out of cover, and plus 6% damage to armor. From the Langmo set, we get plus 30% LMG damage. From the Petrov chest, we get plus 10 LMG damage, and the Obliterate talent giving us plus 20% weapon damage. From the knee pads, the Fox's Prayer, we get plus 8% damage to targets out of cover. From the Overdogs, we get plus 30% amplified weapon damage. Since we run 3 red cores on the build, we get 3 times 15% weapon damage, for a total of plus 45% weapon damage. From our watch level, we get 10% weapon damage. And finally, from the skill tree, another plus 15% weapon damage. Adding all that up means plus 155% weapon and LMG damage combined, plus 30% amplified weapon damage, plus 20% damage to targets out of cover, and plus 6% damage to armor. Those last 3 are the important numbers, because normal weapon damage percentage is additive, meaning all your sources stack together in one bigger pool before being applied. So each extra percent gives slightly less impact than the last. Amplified weapon damage, on the other hand, is multiplicative, applied after the entire pool, acting like a final multiplier on your total output. That's why even small amplified bonuses hit way harder than they look, because they boost everything you've already built instead of just joining the pile. If you want to really get into the math of it, base damage is 100%. We add 155%, making 255% total. Now, do that times 30%, times 20%, and times 6% is a total of 422% damage, meaning we now do 322% more damage than the base weapon itself. Small disclaimer, the assumption is being at full stacks from Obliterate. It can even go up thanks to the backpack talent for an additional 35%. But since this is not always the case, I left it out of the calculation for now. Otherwise, the total amount of weapon damage will go up to 190%. An important note, to get the most out of your damage and Plague of the Outcast ticks, is making sure to focus on one enemy so you can get your stacks in as much as possible. You don't need to kill immediately, but do get it to the point your ticks can finish the job by actually letting the talent to drain the enemy. If the enemy doesn't die before the stacks run out, you're losing out on the chain reaction. But what if you want to focus on the higher level content? When playing the higher difficulty content, you really want some protection from elites in your builds. This can be done fairly easy, but does require some small changes. First, switch the backpack to make it a Langmo with the talent companion. Or as I did, switch the backpack to a Petrov and the chest to a Langmo. This pairs up with the next couple of changes we're making. This made my overall damage higher, more consistent compared to the previous setup having larger spikes. Because in the higher level content, we simply make kills slower, and therefore losing out on the stacking effect from perfectly unstoppable force. Second, switch the specialization to Survivalist, for 10% protection from elites. And to get the Mender Seeker Mine, which can heal for about 26k per second and activates the talent from the backpack to add 15% weapon damage increase when the Seeker Mine is within 5 meters. And third, switch the mods on your gear to protection from elites. Included with the specialization, this brings it up to 48% protection from elites. To make things easy, here's a build overview, starting from the top. For the specialization, we pick Gunner, providing 10% armor on kill and 15% weapon damage. For the primary weapon, the star of the show, the exotic LMG, the Pestilence. For the secondary, just as a backup, the named shotgun, Light Glue. But change this to whatever you like. For the sidearm, and probably not switching this out anytime soon, is the Quick Step, for a 20% movement speed bonus. Don't even know if this gun shoots, but I have it out about 50% of the time. For the gear, we get 3 pieces of Langmo, the mask, holster, and named backpack, the Backbone. With the talent Perfectly Unstoppable Force, giving us plus 30% LMG damage from the brand set. For the chest, the Petrov Defense Group with the talent Obliterate, and plus 10% LMG damage from the brand set. The knee pads, the Fox's Prayer, with damage to targets out of cover. And the final piece, the exotic Overdog Gloves, for the big spike in damage by another 30% amplified weapon damage. The skills, we got the Reviver Hive to save the day, and thanks to our specialization, we have the Banshee Pulse for the long range stunts, but this one can be switched out for about anything you like. For the cores, we have 3 reds and 3 blues, totaling our armor at 1.4 million. And our stats go for 50% crit chance and 103% crit damage. As always, this is only one variation to run, and while I aim to give you the best possible starting point, adapting to your own playstyle is one of the most important parts of building a loadout. Love to hear how you made your build personal down in the comments. Let me know when any questions come up, because I'm happy to help you build. Else, I'll see you in the next one.